So, as Elisa de Wet has recently argued, in terms of everyday human experience, climate and long-term climate change take expression through local weather. An understanding of experiential or vicarious knowledges of local weather is thought to be central to the development of more comprehensive and appropriate climate change communication risk strategies or risk of climate change. Capturing such knowledge demands new and innovative ways of engaging the public, and these are challenging, and Alex has already taken you through a number of ways in which we've been trying to engage the public in talking about weather. What I want to do is explain another experimental strategy that we've been working with in conjunction with the Royal Meteorological Society and the Royal Geographical Society, and that's the Weather Memory Bank. And what we've been doing with this is tapping into the everyday experience and popular memories and narratives through a web-based platform. Now, the good thing about weather is that everybody likes to talk about it, as we know. Weather talk is a safe, impersonal topic. People are happy to talk about it as an easy conversational opening. Even in the conference so far, it's been interesting to talk to people and say, it's on everybody's minds. And it avoids personal, sensitive, sometimes political matters as well. The weather punctuates our daily routines. It's culturally inscribed into what we do, into the cultural fabric of communities, oral history, proverbs, sayings, folklore, narrative, and everyday conversation. As a result of that, it can be read in memory, in behaviour, in text, and identity. And these non-numerical forms of remembering the weather, non-instrumental forms of remembering weather, are very important, as Alex has already shown, for communicating memories of weather, extreme events across generations. And weather also plays a metacognitive role, again, as Alex has already proved and illustrated, in terms of benchmarking people's memories and organising memories. People remember events according to the weather, and events are remembered according to the weather, so it works both ways. And, again, linking into Alex's talk, weather is very much a situated issue, a situated concern. And people's memories of weather are informed by the relational context, the cultures, the values, places people work, places people live, locality. Now, obviously, extreme events provide a particularly unusual benchmark in people's memories. They evoke strong feelings. They're more memorable than the regular day-to-day weather and weather variability, and are often dominant in memory processing. And according to what Harley refers to as the recency effect, more recent events often stick in people's minds, obviously. But as we've seen through Alex's talk, and as I hope to show, there's some extraordinary events, the rare event, which tends to dominate people's memories as well. So what we've been doing is tapping into these themes within weather and memory through the Weather Memory Bank. And this has been an initiative supported through the Royal Meteorological Society to collect information about what people remember, how they remember it, and in what form. And to also encourage a form of dialogic knowledge sharing, whereby narratives that people provide encourage other people to share their own narratives. The same kind of thing, but on a web-based platform, as we try to engage with the community through the community workshops that we held. Now, if I just minimise that, I can just show you what it looks like for a minute. Oops, there's escape. There it is. Right. I'm not going to run through it, but just to illustrate what it looks like. So if you go through the Royal Meteorological Society, what websites, what we've done is we did a whole series of video interviews with the good public of Reading, which is the home of the Royal Meteorological Society. We did 40 interviews across a cross-section of society, asking them a whole series of questions relating to weather, memory and place. We uploaded these onto a platform, and you can view these memories and these recordings by question or by individual recording or do a random search. And then there's a facility within the memory bank for people to record their own memories and to share those. And we've been working with this material, and I just want to run through some of the responses that we've been getting. Okay, so the purpose of the Weather Memory Bank then in drawing on some of the information that we've been receiving through the Weather Memory Bank, is helping us to establish a record of individual but also collective memory. There's some things that seem to stand out across a large cross-section of society with respect to weather in the past. The memory bank is allowing us to identify the kinds of events that become inscribed into cultural memory and infrastructural fabric of communities. We're also being able to sort of look at the responses through the memory bank to look at what form knowledge and information about past events takes and how it's transmitted across generations. And I'll illustrate some of these themes in a few minutes. And I suppose perhaps most interestingly for us, it's also providing an insight into the degree to which nostalgia, and particularly with respect to extreme weather events, is informing people's understandings of risk of climate change today. We had some very interesting but very confused answers with respect to our questions about what do you think is happening to the climate. So we've had a number of themes that are emerging from an analysis of the 40 video interviews and the 110 or so survey responses on the Weather Memory Bank so far. And the kind of themes that are emerging from this are that people are starting to define a typical British weather. Also thinking about the weather in the everyday and pragmatic, emotional and well-being aspects of the weather. This is another theme that's coming out. But these themes in red, placing weather, weather events and intimate weather, local weather knowledges, are the themes that I'd just like to run through briefly today and just illustrate a couple of examples for each one. These are isolated quotations that I'll be drawing on, but we have, as will be clear when you have a look at the Weather Memory Bank, many that reflect the same theme. So, one of the first things to emerge is this issue of place. Now, Alex has already highlighted the importance of place through his presentation, but in the Weather Memory Bank as well, place is featuring as a key issue. And perhaps not surprisingly for British memories of weather, the coast and the coastline feature dominantly in people's weather memories. So we have quotes like this, these from two females aged 25 to 40, one from London, one from Aberdeen, who've entered their details onto the memory bank. I associate growing up with sea breezes because I grew up on the coast. I feel weather is less important to me now that I live in a city. And I'll refer back to this in a few minutes when we talk about place in a couple of minutes. Recently, we've had periods of stormy weather beside the sea. To see the waves crashing over the pier is pretty spectacular. And of course, the sea foam. Now, the drama and the spectacle of the sea, especially during more extreme weather, is in fact a recurring theme throughout the interviews, the surveys and the videos, and perhaps reflects the fact that the sea is a visual indicator or locator of extreme weather. One of the other themes that's emerging is holiday weather, where people are when they are outdoors experiencing weather on holiday. And place-based influences on weather memory nostalgically linked to holiday experiences, specifically childhood memories of holidays. So our Aberdeen respondent notes she had a lot of Scottish and Irish holidays as a child, and she remembers them being sunny and warm. She remembers swimming in the Irish Sea. It probably rained for the majority of those holidays, yet her memories feature the sun and playing outside. We get quite a few references to camping holidays as well, not surprisingly being blown about in the British weather while under canvas. Now, to some extent, holiday weather is just about being outside. And in terms of place, it matters. You're outside in the weather. When you're outside experiencing extreme events, you get more of a sort of tangible feel for the extreme. And for our second quote here, this is a gentleman who's a builder in Reading, somebody we interviewed and videoed. He said, it's hard when it's raining every day, you're outside getting soaked all the time. Albeit we interviewed him in the summer of 2012, which was particularly wet. And this heuristic nature of the responses that we're getting to the weather memory bank is something that I'll return to. But increasingly, urban, specifically indoor lifestyles of modified weather experiences and the dwindling degree of experienced seasonality associated with the human migration to cities, in Russell Hitchens' terms, is having an important influence on weather experiences. And studying these experiences provides fresh insights into how seasons might feature in the lives of various social groups. And what we're finding is that people experience weather less when they're indoors and in an urban context. But much of the literature, including the work by Russell Hitchens, is actually pointing towards the fact that indoor urban lifestyles are actually leading to increased fascination with extremes and also increased interest in seasonal symbolism, including things like particular seasonal kinds of clothing. So it's interesting to sort of look at the way in which this is being played out, and the way in which people were talking about place and indoor lifestyles. Now on to extremes. As Alex has already highlighted, extremes feature dominantly in people's memories of weather and in particular places, and vivid, vicarious, or actual experience of weather events are strongly linked to memory and how memory works. And numerous interviewees and survey respondents were readily able to recall perceived seasonal irregularities, and a lot of them focus on what Harley has referred to as the recency effect. So we got lots of references to the 2010 winter and the complete whiteout that was associated with December of that year, snowing 2 years ago. Our neighbour bought his mini digger home to dig out the cul-de-sac. It then rained and froze, and we had to chip the ice by hand with spades. But we also get the same kind of events as Alex has already discussed. The 47 winter, the 62-63 winter, which started in November. The snow started falling in November 62 and stayed on the ground until March 63. And then also things like the 76 drought. And we also get a number of references to this, which is the Great Storm of 1987. Now, all the references to the Great Storm of 1987 come from people in the south, because people in the north were not affected by it, even though it became something of a national disaster. If I've got time, I'd like to just read a couple of quotes out with respect to the 87 storm, because it illustrates another trend that's emerging, and that is the age of the person at the time that the event happened and how that influences their perception. So 2 quotes from 87. The hurricane of October 87, and this is from a gentleman over 60 based in Kent, caused vast damage in this area, when literally thousands of trees were brought down in the storm. Such was the damage that for 5 days all roads in and out of this community were impassable for 5 days. There was no electricity for 5 days. This followed in January with a snowfall that started at 9:30. And on the Sunday, snowed continuously until 3:15 the following Wednesday. Then it drifted. No vehicle transport of any description was possible. For 5 days we were completely cut off. Bread and milk was supplied by RAF Chinook helicopters, and for 3 days that's what we had to survive on. Relief came after 6 days when the army used massive snow-clearing vehicles to open the road from Tunbridge to the east. Kent cut off from the rest of the world. And then contrast this with a woman now 25 to 40, lives in London. She will have been quite young in 1987 when the storm hit. I recall the Great Storm in the 80s. I remember being really excited about it and wanting to go outside and see all the damage, and my dad telling me that I shouldn't be enjoying it so much as it was a disaster. Different age groups remember things in different ways. Okay. Now then, it would be interesting, if challenging, to think about the way in which these kinds of experiences influencing people's perceptions of climate change, but they are. And I think it's fair to say that when we were looking through the responses to the memory bank so far, we found lots of different ways in which people were remembering, were using their memories of events to inform their understanding of what they think is happening with respect to climate variability and climate change today. Now, for most people, it was about looking at the sky, understanding things from what they know, or weatherwising in Catherine Anderson's terms. And that might be based on their own experiences, and the fact that they know what to expect, they know when to expect the unexpected, because of the fact that they live in a place where they have to. So she's pretty well prepared. Someone from Aberdeen. She's used to living in Scotland, so expecting the unexpected. So I like to think I'm well prepared for this. And then another gentleman over 60 from Woodley in Berkshire. Father was a farmer and talked about his own memories, and his quote goes on to tell us about the fact that he relied on weatherwising to know when to take in the hay, or when to sow, or when to plant particular crops. And the role of personal experience in weather variability, and this kind of experience, in Mark's terms, is a great teacher due to the powerful impact in subsequent memory and behaviour. An experience can condition how people comprehend, respond to the problems of risk and uncertainty with respect to the timing and impact of future changes. Cultural memories, experiences, knowledges of past weather events may thus serve an important orienting function, and can exert influence and what people think is happening in terms of climate change, and even shape individuals' subsequent behaviour in revealing that of others. So for some, this kind of experiential weather knowledge takes the form of, as I said, weather-wising or relying on, weather-wising in an agricultural sense. For others, it's about looking to their past and nostalgia. And this is a key theme in the Weather Memory Bank, and it kind of ties into some of the things that Alex was talking about. But one of the dominant themes emerging from the entries in the Weather Memory Bank is a nostalgia or a longing for a past childhood climate that is perceived to no longer exist, or may indeed have never existed. And this pertains to recollections of childhood weather, particularly snowier winters, experienced during childhood relative to apparently milder winter conditions today. So this is just a selection, including another photograph from the Hardman collection here, showing school children on the sledge in Windermere. But a couple of quotes here, talking about, winter childhoods. So I recall the winter of my childhood when the nearby lakes froze over and we skated on them, skating again. There was thick snow on the beach, blown up into drifts. I don't know if this was one winter or a series, but I remember it well, apart from the date. When I was 15, we had snow every winter without fail. Now we often get years without snow. We don't seem to get the extremes of the weather that I remember as a child. We don't get as much snow. But of course, we don't have to have a lived experience of the past to feel nostalgia for it. And as Baker and Kennedy have argued, you can draw a distinction between real nostalgia and nostalgia for some remembered previous time, and a so-called stimulated nostalgia, a form of vicarious nostalgia revoked from stories, from images, possessions, and received wisdoms. And as Forgas et al. Have argued, remembering details of everyday scenes is a very fragile process. It's often influenced by what people pay attention to, as well as contamination by subsequent incorrect information, misleading information that can produce a false memory later on, or something called the misinformation effect. It's important to acknowledge, as Harley has done, that our memories of past climates depend heavily on idealised stereotypes of seasonal circumstances as well. As Rayner notes, we still expect to see snowmen on Christmas cards, even though in the UK at least white Christmases are rare. Anything deviating from these kind of stereotypical expectations or stereotypical norms thus becomes unusual and representative of change. Change for the better, change for the worse. It may well be that many of the memories, in inverted commas, of past climate conditions, and specifically snowier winters, the kind of things that we see here, are recorded in the Weather Memory Bank, are a function of this misinformation effect. And certainly sort of following on from this kind of misinformation effect, when we ask questions in the Memory Bank about perceptions, understandings of global climate change, we get a whole gamut of responses. This is just a selection of some of the very confused, very contradictory, paradoxical kind of quotes that we get. So summers are hotter, no patterns of warm summers, more extremes, less extremes, so on and so forth, blurring of seasons. There's a confusion, there's an uncertainty, and there's misinformation out there. There's multiple interpretations, and they often conflict. So what can we do with all this? Well, I think we're fairly honest about the fact that, as I said earlier, the materials that we have within the Weather Memory Bank are heuristic. And the nature of the public knowledge that we're retrieving from the Memory Bank is heuristic. So the timing of the interviews, the survey responses when we did them, influences what we're receiving. So the builder who was outside in the heavy rains of 2002 throughout the summer necessarily talked about the weather and the changes in a very negative way. And this kind of thing inevitably sort of reflects the experiences prevailing at the time. Yet we've got some key findings that we think we're starting to be able to gather. First is this confusion over public understanding of climate change. There's multiple interpretations. And this is problematic. And to some extent, this is because people are receiving information about climate change from a range of different sources, from IPCC reports, from Met Office, from newspapers, from various media. There's another question that we asked in the Weather Memory Bank, where do you receive your information from? They also receive it from their own experiential learning, from vicarious knowledges, and from their own nostalgia. But equally, there's a kind of tendency for climate change debates to be positioned within this kind of global scientific meta-narrative, and that's not what people talk about. People talk about climate through weather, local weather, in a narrative, anecdotal, story-based kind of discourse. And this kind of disjuncture raises important questions about how we communicate information about climate change to the public. And it seems to me that tapping into more everyday weather talk may help to identify better ways, or more appropriate, sympathetic ways in which climate debates could be both better understood and messaged. Okay, that's where I'm going to leave it.